Well, hello, how are you all today? Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. The CDC, who sometimes I believe and sometimes I don't, but in this case I do, had just come out with a report indicating that 46 million rural Americans are at heightened risk of dying from preventable causes. And I'm going to read what this is from, but I know that we have a lot of subscribers and viewers who live more rurally than urbanly. And this is of some concern. So I want to let you know about this. We're going to talk a little bit about it. I'll read you the article first, then we'll talk about it. And some of it kind of reflects what I've said in previous videos about a couple of things, and some of it goes beyond that. So listen, and if you are rural living, please pay attention. And if you know people, maybe you don't live rurally, but you have family or friends or whatever, please share this with them, because it could help, because these are preventable deaths, okay? If you're with us on the Patreon channel, I just put up 2 this morning. One on carrying small of back. And what was the other one? The other one was it was a funny story from my undercover days of why not to try new things when you're about to do something important. It worked out okay, because I'm here to laugh about it, but it'd be good. And over on the American Reversion channel, if you're with us over there, and if you're not, the links, all these links are down below. You can come join us. I just put up one about the White Enclave, the part of Baton Rouge that split away from the rest of Baton Rouge, creating essentially what they're calling a wealthy white enclave separate from the rest of the city. I think that's fascinating. I think that it could be a precursor to what we can see happening across the rest of the country, and it's something that I've kind of promoted myself. We need to separate ourselves from these toilets that the major inner cities have become. We're tired of supporting them with our tax dollars and getting nothing in return but crime and drugs and out of wed pregnancies and more government programs and things like that. And what they've done down there in Baton Rouge, I think, is brilliant. It shows that things can get done when people will just work locally, politically and civically, and not give up. They got pushed back a couple of times, but they didn't give up, and the Louisiana Supreme Court has sided with them, and now they are splitting off. And of course, all the people that are being left behind are all mad and everything. It's interesting. So that's over on the American Reversion channel. So here, I saw this yesterday, I guess it was, and I meant to talk about it yesterday, but I got busy. And this is from Scripps News. I'll give credit to Lindsay Theis. And the heading here is CDC says 46 million Americans in rural areas more likely to die from the leading causes of death. Okay. We have their pictures of a stethoscope and things like that, right? Okay. This is new data out today from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And here I want to warn, I'm not a big fan of theirs in all things. They misled us through that entire COVID situation. But just because somebody's wrong about one thing doesn't make it wrong on something else. And they were trying to keep up. That was politically driven. But they were trying to keep up with ever evolving information. Here's stuff that they've been able to go back for 12 years and put together the study, and so that, in my mind, gives this more credibility. So did I say? I'll start that again. New data out today from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows the health gap is widening for many who live in rural parts of the country. 46 million Americans live in rural areas and are more likely to die from one of the leading causes of death. That's 15% of Americans, according to CDC. senior health scientist for CDC's Office of Rural Health, Macarena C. Garcia, says, that's a pretty name, isn't it? That is a Macarena. You think they call her Mac? I assume it's a woman. Yeah, it is a woman because it ends with an A. Says the CDC first started tracking the disparities between rural and urban populations in 2016, looking at data going back to 2010. This update now gives a full picture up to 2022. Now, immediately, this kind of seems to be counterintuitive because we would think about the country, the more rural areas of being healthier, right? And maybe in the past they were because, closer to the land, closer to the food, fresh air, maybe more. But, rural areas have changed. As opposed to the city, you think smog, you think crime, you think, a lot of kids being raised without fathers, and poverty and things like that. So you would think that the city should be less healthy than the country, but that's not what we're finding. The southeastern part of the United States is really the area that has the highest prevalence or proportion of preventable early deaths, Garcia said during a press conference. Heart disease, cancer, unintentional injuries, unintentional poisoning, including drug overdose, unintentional motor vehicle traffic crash, unintentional drowning, and unintentional fall. Stroke and chronic lower respiratory disease were the leading causes of early death in 2022. The CDC says many of these deaths are preventable. According to the report, preventable premature deaths from heart disease increased most from 2010 to 2022, specifically about 9% in the two most rural classifications, while it decreased by 10% in large central metropolitan counties. Wasn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that it actually decreased? It went up 9% in the most rural counties or classifications, and 10%, and it decreased 10% in large central metropolitan counties. And there will be those. I know the argument already. They will say, well, this is all a bunch of propaganda meant to drive people into the cities, the 15-minute cities and things like that. And, there's nothing that I can do to dissuade a person who wants to believe that, but I don't believe that at all. And as a result of what I'll tell you when I'm done looking at this, okay, 44% of heart disease deaths among people 79 and younger in rural areas were potentially preventable, compared with 27% in rural areas. Okay, so that means that more people in the rural areas could have been saved that weren't saved. Okay. There's no. Let's see. Okay, then they talk about something here. They got rid of the. They didn't figure in COVID. They say unintentional injuries were largely driven by drug overdose deaths. Here again, people usually, or in the past, have associated drug use and drug overdose with the cities. It has changed so much, and we know that the rural areas are just full of meth, and it's sad. I mean, it's sad now when you drive through some of these small towns, right? I know a lot of you live in them. Okay, I don't live in them. But I go through them. I am in them a lot, and what I see is just really sad. Gary Guy, the lead health scientist for CDC's Division of Overdose Prevention, says that about 75% of drug overdose deaths involved opioids, mostly illegally manufactured fentanyl. Okay, you see the reason that fentanyl is so big in those areas. Fentanyl, we know the precursors are brought in from China, brought through Mexico, and then up here. They go into the more rural areas because law enforcement is not as prevalent. They just don't have the law enforcement out there. And criminals are going to go where there are fewer cops, simple as that, or less government, overwatch. Let's see. Okay, CDC is funding several states, local jurisdictions. Okay, they're going to do more studies. Access to care, and I've said this in some of my previous ones, is a driving factor for disparity in rural Americans. Since 2010, 167 rural hospitals have closed entirely or gotten rid of inpatient care, according to a February 2024 report from the healthcare consulting firm Chartis. It is also said half of rural community hospitals in the United States are operating at a loss, and more than 400 are in danger of closing. Okay, that's the end of the article. And as I always do when I post this video on the Patreon channel, I'll post this article down below so that you can read it for yourself, print it, send it to whoever you would like. You know, I have seen this, and I've talked about this in the past, that we see a changing demographic in the rural areas. First off, the population is getting older. You know, as the younger people grow up, they may go to college and then they don't go back to the farm, they don't go back to the small town, or maybe they just go to the larger city for jobs, and because they find a life that they feel is better, right? They don't go home. They don't go back and take over the store that mom and dad had. They don't go back and work the farm. Now some do, because, and none of this you can't paint everything with the same brush. But the vast majority of people, you know, it's like that song. What is the song? I mentioned it once before, and one of you all said what it was. That somebody's talking, you know, the world is flat because when people leave town, they never come back. Well, that's happened too often. And I've had small town business owners tell me that, you know, it's very difficult. When opportunities decrease, people are not going to stay where there's no opportunities. So the age is getting older. The average age is getting older in those areas. The younger people that do stay, they're staying in mainly lower paying jobs that don't have, you know, health insurance. I mean, you can come to the city, the suburbs, and you can get jobs all over the place with full health insurance and everything. And you don't have that as much in a small town unless you work for, you know, one of the manufacturing places around. I don't know if the chain restaurants offer those things or not. What I also see is well, let me put it this way. When I go to small towns, I see a difference in the people. They're big. They're big, and I don't mean tall, and I don't mean muscular. I mean big. They're bigger than the people that you see, for the most part, in the suburbs and the cities. And that's just a fact. You know, I'm not being mean here. It's just a fact. And when that happens, when people are over fat, that is a drain. It's horrible for their health. It's a driver of heart disease, of diabetes, of pulmonary disease. It puts pressure on the entire body system that the body wasn't made to carry. And then when you add on that the fact that healthcare is not nearly as available in smaller towns or rural areas as it is in the cities and suburbs, the people are not being treated as well medically as they could be. And so that you have a problem that then is a problem on its own, but it's not really being addressed. Okay, and when you put those things together, it's a very difficult circle to get out of. You know, I have told you before that I worked in a hospital for a long time, and when we saw, just like they're talking about, so many of the small town hospitals are closing down. People are having to drive a long way into the city for tests or for specialists, and more people are needing those tests and specialists, and they're tests and specialists that they can't access in the more rural areas. Like what I started to say was, I worked in a hospital for a long time, and I still have friends who work in hospitals around here, and I have recently asked them, what do you see a difference in the people who present to the ER when they come from a rural area as opposed to close around here? And they said, well, most definitely. They said, but by the time they get to us from, if you have a problem in the suburbs of the city, you call 911, you've got somebody there within minutes. It doesn't matter whether it's police, fire, ambulance. Somebody is in there within minutes. You live more rurally, you call 911, police, fire, ambulance, maybe they're within an hour. And there's a reason that they call it the golden hour. Now, if you've been robbed or shot, that's one thing. If your house is burning down, it's the golden 10 minutes, right? But the golden hour is that hour that if you have medical intervention, you might be able to be saved, or at least a lot of the damage mitigated from a stroke or a heart attack. And people who live more rurally don't have that. And once they go through one of those episodes, then it becomes more dangerous in subsequent episodes. And more of these rural areas are being, the hospitals are just not the people out there to support them. And so more and more hospitals are closing. And this really is a problem. So it's something to keep in mind. And for those of you who, and I always say, I'm coming up with another video that will have something to do with some of this. And all I do is I'm just going to present the facts. It's up to you to make your own decision where you want to live. And I would never presume to tell anybody where they should live, even though plenty of people presume to tell me where I should live. But wherever you do, if you live rurally, realize this. Take this into consideration. I'm not telling you to move. I'm telling you to take care of your health. Okay? Realize that these things, many things are preventable. It's going to have a lot to do with your diet and your activity level, right? And it's not just how many calories, it's what kind. If you eat trash, you're going to have a trash body. Okay? Eat better. And I know there are plenty of you out there who do this, and this isn't for you. This is for the ones who may need the advice. And I know people that say, well, I work hard. I work on the farm. I work on the lifting heavy things every now and then is not the kind of exercise that keeps you healthy. I know a lot of farmers, big guys, right? Well, they're very much overweight. They can lift a lot of weight, and then they die of a heart attack in their 60s and 70s. So, sometimes below that. And I've known guys that died in their 50s in the city from heart attacks, but so it's not that doesn't happen, but what we're talking about here is percentages. So if you live rurally, recognize these truths and take care of yourself. Make sure you're keeping up on your, have that annual checkup. Make sure, how's your ticker doing, right? How's your diet? You've heard me talk about the carnivore diet. Do that if you want. I highly recommend it, but you do your own research on that. And if you know people, those of you who still have mom and dad or grandmother and granddad or brother or sister, aunt and uncle still living out there rurally, give them a call. I have to make sure, how you doing? Well, what you hear so much? Well, I'm coming up to the city next Thursday, gonna have to see the doctor. Well, okay. If you have those things that you have to go up to the city to see the doctor, please take better care of yourself so that you don't have to. Okay, you can live a long life. It's very possible to live a long life out in the country. But you have to take care of yourself. Okay? So do take care of yourself. And like I say, if I don't have my books, I ran out of books. I told you yesterday, we sold out of the books. If you want my books, the links are down below, and you can get them through Amazon. They're not out. They have plenty. They just keep printing them up. And but you can get them from Amazon right now very fast. But I've got an order in for another big load, and the way you can order them from me is through the stonemont.us website, and that link is also down below. Join us on Patreon if you'd like. Join us over on American Reversion if you'd like to hear about that white enclave down in Louisiana. I think it's a very interesting story, and I think that that's what we may be seeing happening more and more. So I'm going to get out of here, go do some things, and just keep that in mind. Keep in mind, and I'll put the article over on Patreon so you can read it. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. Take care of yourself and live well tomorrow, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.